Gonzaga and UCLA have met at least once in each of the past 4 seasons, a streak that will continue for 2 more years after Mark Few and Mick Cronin agreed to a 2-year scheduling deal.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Friday and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by GameTime. Folks, download the GameTime app now, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Well, the Zags are rumored to be considering an NIL-based tournament in 2025. Zag Baseball has a big game ahead early next week, and former Zag Baseball player Brett Harris has an amazing MLB debut. We're going to get to all of that to close out today's show, but we want to start the show talking about the news that Gonzaga and UCLA have once again linked up on a 2-year deal. I wanted to call it a home and home, but both games are going to be played at neutral sites. And it's a continuation of what has been a long, continuous streak of Gonzaga playing UCLA every single year and Gonzaga continuing to beat UCLA every single year. So some more details about the actual events for starters. The Zags are planning to play UCLA on the road this year at the Intuit Dome, which is the new home of the Los Angeles Clippers. That game will take place sometime this non-conference season, November, December, most likely. Again, it's the Clippers' new home. It's supposed to be a very state-of-the-art, high-level, exceptional basketball arena. Something we've seen Mark Few and the Zags do a lot is try to play games at newer arenas or kind of upscale, fancier arenas. It's something that they've done quite a bit. It makes sense for Gonzaga and UCLA to play this game there. And it'll be, again, sometime in 2024. And then the return game, not a surprise, will be at the Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle. Gonzaga has loaded up games, non-conference games in Seattle. They played UConn there last year. They'll play UCLA there next year. This season, they will play Kentucky there. That is a tremendous 3-year streak of playing UConn, UCLA, and Kentucky. Obviously, Gonzaga is able to pull high-level programs to be willing to play them in Seattle. Hopefully, this streak will eventually allow Gonzaga to play games at home. I've continued to be a champion of actual home-and-home series. I would love to see UCLA play in the Kennel. I'd love to see Kentucky play in the Kennel. And as we all predicted when that 6-year series came out, John Calipari is not going to be the head coach of the Kentucky Wildcats when that game happens. But regardless, this is an objectively good thing. UCLA moves into the Big Ten. One of the fears that I had, that many others in this space had, was that this consolidation of high major conferences and then the expansion of the conference schedules is going to allow less non-conference games for these marquee opponents or marquee teams to play. And if teams are going to continue to jump into 3-game MTEs, which we expect to continue, and we'll get to more about that in the second segment, there's just not a lot of room for one-off non-conference matchups like this one, like Gonzaga's series against Washington or San Diego State, or in the past series against teams like Texas and North Carolina and Arizona, and et cetera, et cetera. The fear is that there's going to be less of those going forward. Mark Few's directly spoken about this last year at the Maui Invitational. He basically said, enjoy this while you can, because it might not continue to look like this. There might not be very many opportunities for all these teams to get together for events like this, because he's concerned about the expansion of those conference schedules. So this is a good thing. Gonzaga gets to play UCLA. It's also just quite fun to play UCLA. It has been very fun to play UCLA in particular for Gonzaga the last 4 years, because they have played each other every single year, and Gonzaga has won every single time. It, of course, starts with the incredible all-time classic Jalen Suggs 37-foot bank shot 3-point buzzer beater to send UCLA home after, as an 11 seed, they ran all the way to the Final Four. Incredibly hard-fought game. Gonzaga wins that one, continues their undefeated season into the national championship game. We can stop the conversation there. It was an incredible shot by Jalen Suggs. The next year, Gonzaga and UCLA met up in the Empire Classic. The teams were ranked number 1 and number 2 when this game happened, and Gonzaga just walloped UCLA in that one, 83-63. Chet Holmgren was fantastic. Drew Timme was fantastic. The Zags dominated and rolled to a victory there in that one. The next year, Gonzaga once again faced off against UCLA in the NCAA tournament. Gonzaga was a 3 seed. UCLA was a 2 seed. Gonzaga was down 13 points at one point in that game. I believe at halftime they were down exactly 13. They stormed all the way back for a victory thanks to a Julian Strother game-winning three-pointer. Wasn't quite a buzzer beater like Jalen Suggs' was, but still a heartbreaking, devastating loss for UCLA. Another incredible NCAA tournament victory for Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Once again, we can stop talking about the rest of that tournament at that point. But two times in the last 3 years, or two times in 3 years, Gonzaga had beat UCLA in the NCAA tournament. And then last year, these teams met up once again. This time, they were opponents in the Maui Invitational. Anton Watson dropped 32 points, which was a career high for him at the time. It was an ugly game. It was a foul-prone game, lots of officiating in that game, just sloppy shot making on both sides. Graham Ike was in foul trouble most of the game. Anton Watson basically put the team on his back, went 14 of 15 from the field, and Gonzaga won that one against the Bruins. Now 4-0 against UCLA in the last 4 years, 7-2 all-time against the Bruins, and they have won 5 of the last 6. This is no longer hasn't really been a competitive series in a long time. Of course, the most notable, until Jalen Suggs' shot, the most notable game between Gonzaga and UCLA was Gonzaga blowing that 17-point lead in the 2006 NCAA tournament, and Adam Morrison very famously showing his emotions on the court at the end of the game. But since then, it has been all Zags all the time, and we will see if that can continue. And when they play this year, when Gonzaga and UCLA meet up, there are going to be some familiar faces on that UCLA team, most notably Dominick Harris, former Gonzaga guard, the original member of the Tricky Trio who helped recruit both Jalen Suggs and Julian Strother to come to Gonzaga. Dom never really got a significant chance to play for the Zags during his time with the program. Ended up transferring after this previous season and transferred to LMU. Spent last year playing for LMU, averaged about 14 points a game, was one of their best players. Ended up moving into the starting lineup, prolific three-point shooter. Did not do well when he played Gonzaga in the first game against Gonzaga at the Kennel. He really struggled, and Gonzaga just absolutely obliterated LMU. It might have been their most complete, dominant overall performance of the entire season. In the second game, Dom was out with a knee injury, so he did not get another opportunity to play against Gonzaga. You can bet he's looking forward to getting another shot to do it this year. Hopefully he is healthy and able to contribute for the team in that game. The UCLA also added Trent Perry. Trent Perry is a top guard prospect in the 2024 recruiting class. He had previously been committed to USC, but decommitted when Coach Andy Enfield left to take the job at SMU. Perry then reopened his commitment. Gonzaga got involved again. They had been in his top 6 prior to his commitment to USC. He plays at Harvard Westlake High School, the same high school as Gonzaga 2025 target Nick Kamenia. So Gonzaga was involved in both Perry and Kamenia's recruitment. Perry, again, reopened his recruitment. Gonzaga got involved again. He looked at Virginia heavily, but then has ended up committing to UCLA. So there will be a former Zag on the UCLA roster in Dominick Harris. There will be a former Gonzaga target on the UCLA team in incoming freshman Trent Perry. They have a lot of returners from last year's team, and obviously guys who are not happy about losing to Gonzaga last year in Maui. UCLA also made some significant transfer portal additions this offseason. Kobe Johnson comes in from USC, Sky Clark from Louisville, Oklahoma State's Eric Daly, Oregon State's Tyler Bilodeau, and South Dakota State's William Kyle III. For Gonzaga, this represents another elite game on their non-conference schedule, which is coming together very nicely for the Zags in the upcoming 24-25 season. They'll play UCLA in Inglewood. They will play San Diego State at San Diego State. They will host the Washington Huskies in the Kennel. That series is continuing. Some people have said they thought it ended after last year, but because there was cancellations for the COVID years, the series has been extended for 2 more years. The Zags will play UConn at basketball mecca, the Madison Square Garden. They will host Kentucky at the Climate Pledge Arena, and they will play 3 games in the Battle for Atlantis. Among the opponents they could play there are Arizona, Louisville, Indiana, Creighton, West Virginia, Oklahoma, and Davidson. This is shaping up to be an outstanding non-conference schedule for Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs. And looking ahead, all the way ahead to the next season of 25-26, Gonzaga has reportedly been in communication about participating in an NIL-based event in 2025. And folks, this could be the future of college basketball MTEs. We're going to talk about that in just a second. right after I tell you about today's sponsor, GameTime. Folks, I'm stoked, just like all of you, about the NBA playoffs that are going on right now. Multiple Zags participating. And wouldn't it be cool to be able to go to a game just on a whim? Well, good news. GameTime is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. And folks, prices on the GameTime app, even for playoff games, they actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. So with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. And folks, I often worry about buying tickets from other third-party apps where you're not sure if the ticket you're getting is going to be legitimate, concerned you're going to try to walk into the arena and the ticket's not going to scan for you. The best part about GameTime is your purchase is covered by the most flexible customer service policy in the entire ticketing industry. And folks, I love having that peace of mind. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app now, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the GameTime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks. Still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we're still talking scheduling. Instead of talking about this upcoming season, though, we are looking ahead to the 2025-26 season, where we have a report from CBS Sports that Gonzaga is in communication to participate in the 2025 Players Era Festival. This is a new MTE event that will start this year. Gonzaga is not participating this year, presumably because they are already committed to the Battle for Atlantis, and they're not going to do two different MTEs. But the main storyline with this event is a Las Vegas-based MTE that will take place over Feast Week, is that there is a guaranteed $1 million NIL payout per team. Every team that participates in this event will receive $1 million in NIL money that can be distributed amongst the team. Roughly $100,000 per player. It depends how the teams distribute it. It depends what they do with walk-ons. It depends on all of that stuff. But roughly $100,000 per player in NIL money to participate in this MTE. Now, athletes do have to do other stuff. The article indicated that there are multiple off-the-court activities that student athletes have to do in order to receive the money. My guess would be autograph signing, social media promotions, maybe speaking events, stuff of that ilk, of that nature, things that the NCAA used to absolutely crucify student athletes for doing, which now they are encouraged to do in order to make money. The wild turn of events in college athletics. But it also indicates that there could be as much as $1 million additional for teams that win the event. So you go to this event, you get $1 million for your team, $100,000 per player. You go win the dang thing. All your players might get as much as $200,000 in that NIL money. Like I said, the event is going to begin in 2024, so we will get a first look at what this is going to look like. It's going to be an 8-team event this year, and next year it will be a 16-team event. The majority of the teams who have signed up for this year, I'm going to say who they are in a second, are all signed up for 3-year deals. So if Gonzaga does join this event next year, the majority of the teams that are in it this year will probably still be participants next year as well. The current 2024 slate, 7 of the 8 teams have been determined. 1 spot is still open. The 7 teams set to participate: the Alabama Crimson Tide, Houston Cougars, Notre Dame Fighting Irish, Oregon Ducks, Rutgers Scarlet Knights, San Diego State Aztecs, and the Aggies of Texas A&M. One more team to join. Again, most of those teams will probably be in the event in the future. Gonzaga is included in conversations to be involved in 2025. Other teams that have been in those conversations include Duke, Kansas, Syracuse, Michigan, and Virginia. All of that to say this. This is the future of college athletics, multi-team events. There's really not a debate in my mind about this. If there are multiple companies, donors, whatever, angel investors who are willing to put up the kind of money to host an event where the teams that participate can get guaranteed NIL money for their student athletes, every team is going to jump on this opportunity. And you have the proof right here. Look at this list of teams that are either participating this year or are being involved in consideration for next year. It's multiple blue bloods. It's Duke, it's Kansas, Gonzaga's in the mix. You have teams like Michigan, you have teams like Alabama and Houston who were elite teams last season. San Diego State's been fantastic. Like, this is a group of premier college basketball programs. Why would any team go to an MTE like Old Spice or Atlantis or Maui or, take your pick of other ones, if they could also go to an event that has a similarly stacked group of teams where you get guaranteed money for your athletes. Like, it's just, there's not even a comparison here. I'm going to use a quote from one of my favorite movies, probably many people out there's favorite movies, because if you're listening to the show, you're a sports fan. That's Moneyball. Brad Pitt's character, of course, Billy Bean, turns to the camera and says, adapt or die. And that's the situation here. Adapt or die. If MTEs are going to start paying out guaranteed NIL money for student athletes, the other MTEs that aren't doing that, they're going to have to do the same, or they're not going to survive. To me, this is very cut and dry. It's hard to imagine that it goes any other direction other than this. And I don't think this is a bad thing. I don't know all the logistics, and certainly some of the long-standing kind of historical MTEs may have an issue being able to do this, and it could cause us to not have them anymore. And that would be sad. I don't want to see the Maui Invitational go away. I don't want to see the Battle for Atlantis go away. I don't want to see the Phil Knight Invitational go away. But most of those big time events are probably going to be able to fund this. They're going to find a way to make it so that NIL is a part of the pay structure for these teams to come to these events. If they cannot do it, other events will crop up. We'll have new ones like this Players Era Festival in Las Vegas. Somebody else will create one in Maui and will pay out money. Like, that's what's going to happen. This is going to continue to be this way unless there are huge changes that prevent MTEs from being a part of the pay structure for student athletes in NIL, which there currently is not any legislation about pretty much anything involving NIL, but certainly not in that regard. To me, this seems like the future. This seems like the direction it's going. And again, for Gonzaga, this makes so much sense. Gonzaga they probably don't have the NIL budget of some of the big time programs. We say probably because we don't know for sure, but like, let's be honest. Gonzaga doesn't have the same amount of money to throw at recruits, at transfers that Kentucky does, that Arkansas does, that, Duke and those other schools do. They don't. They have managed incredibly successfully to navigate the transfer portal and add high profile pieces without necessarily having that money. And I certainly don't think Gonzaga is poor from an NIL perspective. They've added marquee players and presumably they're able to pay them. But why would you pass up on an opportunity to guarantee your players upwards of $100,000? Like, why? Like, if you can do that, if you can just add that into your recruiting pitch, how helpful is that? If you're a student athlete and you're choosing between two different schools, and one of them is like, hey, for the next 2 years, we're going to participate in this event that's going to guarantee you $100,000 ish in each of the next 2 years, as well as, whatever their offer is for NIL money, and another school is not offering that. I mean, that gives you an advantage. That gives you a big advantage. So this feels like the future. Gonzaga, as usual, on the cutting edge, involved in early conversations with something like this. That doesn't surprise me. Mark Few and the staff are always looking at ways to innovate, always looking at ways to kind of get an advantage wherever they can, whether it's recruiting internationally, whether it's navigating the grad transfer situation before many other folks did. Like, they've always been kind of on the cutting edge of adaptations in college basketball. To me, this is going to be the future of college basketball. This movement is going to continue to happen. NIL is going to be heavily involved in the pay structure for student athletes in MTE events or in MTEs going forward. And I think Gonzaga is smart to try to get involved however they can. This event that's in 2024 and in the future, they're currently negotiating with 3 different venues in Las Vegas: the T-Mobile Arena, the MGM Garden Grand Arena, which is where Gonzaga played USC last year, and the Michelob Ultra Arena as well. So we'll see if Gonzaga gets involved in 2025 again. They're not going to be involved in the event this year because they were already going to be in that battle for Atlantis, but it wouldn't surprise me at all to see Gonzaga in that event in 2025 again. A lot of other great teams already set to participate with those 3-year contracts, and a lot of other great teams potentially set to follow as well. Well, the Zags, we're talking baseball now to close out the show. They are off this weekend, but they do host USC ahead of a big weekend next week against Pepperdine, trying to earn a top 2 seed in the WCC tournament. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Right after I tell you about today's sponsor, Monopoly Go. Folks, I've been told I'm a competitive person, and it's true. Who isn't, right? I have a competitive side. Pretty much we all do. And my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It has been downloaded over 150 million times. It is a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of different Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is getting to mess with my friends. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly, but now I can also rob their vaults of riches for myself, and the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or the Google Play Store. All right, closing out the show, talking a little Zag baseball as they get towards the end of their regular season. Last weekend, Gonzaga took 2 of 3 from Pacific. Really wanted that sweep there. That would have helped them out quite a bit, but they lost that Saturday game. And they now sit all the way down in 4th place in the WCC baseball standings. They have a 14-7 record. They are 19-26 overall. They also played Oregon State last week on Tuesday. And I have kind of made my feelings about Tuesday or midweek baseball games fairly clear on the podcast. They are just kind of a crapshoot. Teams are playing they're pitching their 4th or 5th option as a starter. Oftentimes it's a freshman, oftentimes it's a reliever, and you see some pretty wonky results in midweek games. I have said that a couple times on the show, and I got very validated by looking at the score of Gonzaga's game against Oregon State on Tuesday, 20-13. It's a football score, folks. That is a football score right there. Happened in a baseball game. 20-13, Oregon State wins that one. The midweek games just don't matter all that much for Gonzaga. They're trying to boost their standings in the WCC, which you do by playing other WCC teams, not by playing midweek non-conference games. For now, though, Gonzaga has to wait. They don't play any games this weekend. They will watch Portland, who is 13-5, and St. Mary's, who is also 13-5. Both those games barely ahead of Gonzaga, who's 14-7. Portland is at Pepperdine this weekend. St. Mary's hosts Pacific this weekend. Both those teams are not very good, but if Gonzaga can, if either team can lose one game, if Portland goes 2 out of 3 from Pepperdine, if St. Mary's takes 2 out of 3 from Pacific, that puts Gonzaga in a better spot in the driver's seat in order to potentially move all the way up from 4th into 2nd. You want to get 2nd place, at least in the WCC, in order to get a bye in the regional tournament. So that's why Gonzaga is kind of gunning for that 2nd place spot. How those two teams do will help determine what Gonzaga needs to do their next weekend. They host Pepperdine for the final series of the season, regular season, I should say, May 16th through 18th. That's Thursday through Saturday. That's at Patterson Baseball Complex. If you're in Spokane, the weather's good enough. Last opportunity to see Gonzaga at the Patterson Baseball Complex, May 16th through 18th. Again, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But before that, they do play USC on Tuesday, another one of those goofy midweek games. USC's come into town to play Pullman, to play Washington State in Pullman over the weekend. They're going to stay an extra day, play Gonzaga on Tuesday at the Patterson Baseball Complex. USC's not a great baseball squad. They're 22-26 on the year, 12-11 in the Pac-12, but it'd be a nice opportunity for Gonzaga to kind of just get a tune-up after not playing this weekend. You don't want a super long break before your next game, so they'll get a chance to play USC, kind of get their legs stretched, as it were, before they play that 3-game series against Pepperdine, where they really need to do well if they want to get themselves bumped up in the WCC standings heading into the WCC regionals in a couple of weeks. Want to stick with Zag baseball. One more fun story here. Brett Harris, former Gonzaga baseball third baseman, he made his major league debut with the Oakland A's. He's been a prospect with them for a couple of years, got called up last week. And in his first game with the Oakland A's, he blasted a pair of home runs. The first 2 hits of his major league baseball career were both home runs. Exceedingly rare for a player to do that. It's rare for a player to have their first hit be a home run, but for him to do it twice. Harris wasn't really known as a power hitter. He's not a huge home run hitter at Gonzaga. He wasn't a huge home run hitter in the minor leagues. He wasn't billed as a home run hitter coming up for Oakland, but fans who were at that game were like, well, now clearly this is the greatest home run hitter of all time. He's got 2 home runs in his first 2 games. Really nice to see that from Brett. He played at Gonzaga from 2019 to 2021. He was a 7th round pick by the A's in that 2021 draft. When he debuted, he became the 30th Gonzaga player to ever play in Major League Baseball. We talk a lot about the Zags success putting players in the NBA. This year, we've talked about the Zags success putting players in the WNBA with a pair of draft picks in that regard. But Gonzaga has a rich history of baseball success as well. Now, primarily, it has been with pitchers, which is kind of interesting, as Brett Harris, of course, not a pitcher. He's a third baseman. But if you look at the recent success for the Gonzaga baseball program in terms of putting players in the major leagues, they're mostly pitchers. The counterexamples are now Brett Harris, as well as Taylor Jones, who actually started his career as a pitcher, but transferred to first base, played first base for Gonzaga, and then ended up having a brief cameo with the Houston Astros in, I think, 2020. He played in the big leagues for a little bit as a first baseman, left fielder type. But those are the only 2 hitters who've debuted for Gonzaga in recent years. Meanwhile, on the pitching side, you have Brandon Bailey, you have Wyatt Mills, Eli Morgan with Cleveland, Marco Gonzalez has been the most known. He's now playing for the Pittsburgh Pirates. You had Tyler Olson and Cody Martin back in the day, about 8-10 years ago. Lots and lots and lots of pitchers. In recent years, the most recent draft picks out of Gonzaga have been guys like Owen Wild and William Kempner and Tristan Vreeling and Gabriel Hughes, all of them pitchers. Brody Jesse, pitchers, all of them pitchers. So don't expect to see a lot more Gonzaga hitters making their major league debut. I forgot Alec Jacob. He's been pitching in the major leagues recently as well. Don't expect a lot of hitters, but Brett Harris is one of them, and he's been very good. He's overall numbers for Oakland right now, 4 of 24 with 3 home runs. So 3 of his 4 hits have been round trippers, 5 RBIs, 6 walks, and 5 strikeouts in 7 games. He was hitting .289 with a .418 on base percentage with 3 home runs and 20 RBIs at AAA. He would play 27 games there. And throughout his career as a minor league baseball player since 2021, when he was drafted, he has hit .281 for his career. If you just consistently hit and hit and hit in the minor leagues, they're going to give you a shot eventually, especially in Oakland, where they just don't have a lot of talent on that Major League Baseball roster. But huge shout out to Brett, the active person on social media. Really fun to follow him and see him get this opportunity and make the most of it. I hope he gets a chance to stick long term with the Oakland A's. We will see if he ends up kind of bouncing up and down between AAA and the major leagues. But Oakland doesn't have a whole lot of talent on their roster right now. So if he continues to produce, it is hard to imagine the A's won't give him an opportunity to continue to do so going forward. It's going to wrap it up for us today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. We'll be back next week, keeping you up to date on any transfer portal updates. We'll keep going on our season in review series, start getting ahead at the NBA G League Combine, which is taking place in a couple of days. We'll have an update on Anton Watson, whether he gets an invite to the actual draft combine as well. Thanks for listening. And until next time, as always, first of all, have a great weekend and go Zags.